When should you wear a lifting belt? Find out in today's Q&A. Hey everyone, Selwyn here from WynnStrength.com, where the goal of the channel is to help you get a little bit stronger every single day. Thanks for clicking on another 5 Minute Friday Q&A series where I attempt to answer your questions in under 5 minutes. If you would like your question answered, please consider leaving a comment below and I can get to that in a future video. So today's video is going to address the question of when should you wear a lifting belt when strength training? Let's start that timer. So wear a lifting belt whenever you want. Stop the timer. But you probably want a little bit more of a nuanced answer to that with some actual research to back that up. So let's start the timer for real and answer this question. So here's what the current research actually has to say about wearing a lifting belt. It helps obviously improve performance. On average, most people got around a 5 to 15% boost in their performance when lifting weights. There's also no real significant difference in muscle activation when comparing, when you're looking at squats, comparing a belted and unbelted versions of those two lifts. Thirdly, it helps us to increase that intra-abdominal pressure. On average 15 to 40% depending on the lifter and the lift being performed. And finally, it also increases blood pressure, much like the valsalva maneuver where you have to hold your breath to lift a weight. So, and you hold that breath for the entirety of the lift, valsalva maneuver right there. So if you do have high blood pressure, maybe see a doctor before doing these things. Yeah, let's leave it at that. So with those 4 things in mind, I think that dispels a lot of myths around what a lifting belt does and doesn't do. So first of all, its real purpose is to give you an extra layer of support around the midsection. It provides an external force to press against. I talk about this more in my breathing and bracing video regarding the deadlift. But it's really just helping you add rigidity to your frame in order to have a more solid midsection to push weights against. Think of trying to push something with a wet noodle versus a dry noodle. The dry noodle is more rigid, so it's going to be a lot easier. Anytime you see movement in the core, there's going to be power leak there, which means a less efficient and effective movement, meaning you can't push out as much weight as you normally could if you had that proper braced rigid section. So from a big picture perspective, I would say if you're still learning the lifts and learning how to breathe and brace, you probably don't need a lifting belt, just because it's another layer of complexity that you don't really need right now. Also with that, you're managing loads that aren't really that crucial to wearing a belt. I think once you have at least 6 months of lifting under your belt, you understand how to brace the core, how to breathe correctly. You're breathing into your stomach, you're bracing out, you're able to feel what it feels like to brace not just your abs at the front, but also your obliques on the side and your lower back at the back, because breathing and bracing is a 360-degree maneuver there. It's not just simply bracing your abs. Think about bracing, obviously, your sides and back to really crunch down and secure that midsection to prevent any loss of power there. Now, when you're actually at that level and you're looking at using an actual belt for lifting, I'll have a couple of different mindsets for my own personal training. The first is that I consider the belted lifts different to the unbelted lifts. So coming from a powerlifting background, things like the squat, bench, overhead press, the main competition style movements will have a belt, and my accessory movements can include things like an unbelted squat. So my accessory lifting does include the squat without a belt, which is going to help, again, mitigate that stress. Again, it's not there to protect the back. I'm going to be using less weight because I don't have that external force in order to drive my belly against. And then when you look at the training outcomes, you probably shouldn't have a 20% discrepancy between your belted and unbelted lift. Now, if you start driving into that 20% and up range, then you might have to consider not using that belt as often, because there shouldn't be that big of a disparity between those two lifts, because again, the lifting belt probably increases 5 to 15% performance. So when we start getting over that 20% range, we're looking at a significant changes in performance from a belt that shouldn't add that much. And secondly, with training, for most, or if not all of my accessory lifts, I don't like to use a lifting belt. And that's because we're not using maximal loads. For the most part, accessory lifts are going to be lower weights because we're doing higher reps and more volume, because they're there to again, support your main lifts and build up the body to help bring those accessory lifts up. So we're not using maximal load, so the belt isn't necessary for getting that strong breathing and bracing. And then I also like to use that time to practice breathing and bracing with submaximal loads, but for a longer period of time. So we're getting that repetitions in the form of stamina and time under tension to drive that core to be engaged slightly better over time. And basically, if you're wearing your belt from when you walk into the gym to when you walk out of the gym, you're probably wearing the belt wrong and utilizing it not well. I also don't personally like to cinch the belt down as hard as I can. I like to have be able to slide my flat palm in between my torso. So don't wear a belt too tight. Really wear a belt whenever you want to, because that's how that works. Hopefully you've got some value out of this video. If you did, consider clicking that like button below, and also subscribe to the 5-Minute Friday Q&A playlist so you don't miss out on any future episodes, and catch up on those past episodes there. This has been Selwyn from Wynn Strength, and remember to never stop learning and to never stop lifting.